through my Sunday ticket purchase for the year, so
Dang, okay.
dialing in.
I'll tell you what, Brandon. I'm very happy being up here now. I don't have to look at the TV maps anymore to see
That's
the
right.
Vikings.
Yeah, you already know you're
It's
getting them all the
on
time.
every Sunday, guaranteed. Even if they suck, they're on here. So I'm
They're
kind of
here.
happy about that one, Brandon. Yep, they're
I
here.
love it. Go Big 12 or go home. I'm Brandon Shanahan, joined as always by broadcasting legend Drew Russell. Drew, this might be the happiest show we've ever done. I mean, what a night for the Big 12. Big swings, some big misses. So whatever you're feeling this morning, you're feeling a lot of it. If you're feeling good, you're feeling great. If you're feeling bad, like especially one of the Big 12 teams that we're going to talk about here, you're feeling real bad. But outstanding stuff. If you're listening to this, like the video, subscribe. It
Mhm.
doesn't hurt you at all. It helps us a ton. Great stuff here on the SVSM network. And go Big 12 or go big home or go home. Boy, how about them Cyclones? Let's start first and foremost.
Well, as we can see right here, this is the Cardinal and Gold State, Brandon Shanahan. What a time to be alive for both of us. Our teams rocked it yesterday. Iowa State, a major, major victory over Iowa in one of the most wild games in Cyhawk history. If you're a Cyclone fan, it's an all-time great win. If you're an Iowa fan, that's a painful, painful loss considering they absolutely had it in the bag. Tale of two halves, and Iowa State found one more play and had a redshirt freshman kicker come in and just hit a rocket. And that's the difference. But what a day in the Big 12 yesterday, Brandon. Some unbelievable games across the board, some significant wins. When you look at Iowa State over Iowa, that was a big win for the conference. Oklahoma State beating Arkansas when they did not look good for a good chunk of the day, but they found a way to get done, much to my dismay, but happy for Oklahoma State. And, there's some tough losses too. There was some, a tough loss for Kansas at Illinois. That wasn't too great. Texas Tech was lost against Washington State last night. I don't even know what the heck is happening in Lubbock. So we'll get all into it, but very interesting bag of results yesterday. And that was one of my favorite college football days a long time, Brandon. I have badly needed a college football Saturday to do nothing. And yesterday, boy, it delivered on entertainment.
You're absolutely right. And I mean, even from the get-go, even like outside of the Big 12, I mean, Texas. Also, here's the thing about Texas. That team was built in the Big 12. I know they got an SEC patch on their jersey. That's a Big 12 team, and they just took Michigan to the cleaners. And that was a very affirming thing for me because this entire offseason, I'm like, what do people see in Michigan? What are they seeing? Like, yeah, I know their defense is going to be good, but their offense is Iowa. Like, what are we talking about? And now they got ranked in the top 10, and they're still in that top 4 hunt of the Big 10. What are people talking about? But I mean, we kind of almost saw them exposed against Fresno State. They pulled away late in that game. Let's not act like they blew Fresno State out of the water. A bottom tier MWC team. And then, of course, they play a real big dog in the team that was built in the Big 12 in the Texas Longhorns and got boat raced at home. Unbelievable stuff. Yesterday was a very affirming day. There was a lot of things that I was like, boy, am I crazy for thinking this?
Yeah.
And then I went to bed last night and like, no, I was right.
No, you're right, Brandon. I mean, and I'll tell you what, we'll get into every one of these Big 12 games, some quick, some will go into more detail. Look, Houston, I thought was dead in the water after week one. They almost pulled off one of the dumbest upsets I've ever seen in my life last night. Like
That's the
that
perfect
game,
way to
Brandon,
put it.
I had multiple OU fans texting me. They're like, what is happening? I said, I don't know. Like, Houston didn't even play great, but OU is so bad and so undisciplined that they found a way to stay in the game. That game was bananas. Obviously, we'll get into your beloved Huskers, Brandon, just taking it to Colorado. That first half was cinema. The first 30 minutes, that was absolutely incredible. Utah taking care of Baylor. Kansas State got a nice win against Tulane on the road. That's not a bad Tulane team. They badly
That was a gritty
needed
win
that
too.
the conference. That was a grit freaking win for them. Arizona State taking out Mississippi State. That was a nice win as well last night, I think, just for Arizona State to build some confidence regarding that. But no, you're right on just the day. I mean, Notre Dame losing at home was stunning.
Boy, I almost forgot about that one. That was
Northern
tough.
Illinois. I mean, yeah, that did happen.
Like, there was a ton of people like penciling. Like after they beat Texas A&M last week, who I'm also not very high on. They were getting penciled into the college football playoff already. I'm like, yeah, I guess, but Notre Dame they get tripped up sometimes.
So, I mean, one of the most famous upsets in college football history is when Appalachian State beat Michigan. And that was, 15 plus years ago now, Brandon. But when that happened, it was stunning. And we've had some top 10 teams go down in years past, maybe to schools like Northern Illinois. And everybody's like, well, that, it was shocking, but maybe not as stunning as Appalachian State. There was something shocking about that one yesterday because Notre Dame, that was a raucous environment, at Texas A&M week 1. They played discipline, they stayed calm, and they found a way to get a win. Looked like their defense really took it to A&M. But they weren't who we thought they were. And Northern Illinois pulled off an all-time win. They stayed calm. It was awesome to see their coach's reaction and just like the tears that were flooding down his face. And you and I have discussed a lot about the future of college football over the summer, Brandon. Lord knows we've spent enough minutes on it. But it was interesting that watching that end of that game yesterday, I was flipping back between that and Iowa State. That's why we love college football. That's why people are obsessed with this. It creates this drama that you just don't believe. But that was a significant loss for Notre Dame. Yes, they're independent, Brandon, but they are affiliated with the ACC and all their other sports. ACC kind of just needed them as a big dog just to help out their other teams since they do play some conference games. For them to lose, Brandon, was a bad. I know they're independent, but it wasn't good for the ACC conference in general. ACC has taken some body blows. NC State was lost against Tennessee. Tennessee just waxed them last night. It was not even close. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to break down. We'll do our best to break it down within an hour. But, I mean, a remarkable week 2 of college football. One of the best week 2s we've had in a long time. I was heavily glued yesterday.
And now just getting into the Big 12 slate, starting on Friday nights, BYU and SMU. I just went on a tangent about how right I was about a lot of things. One thing that, my whole outlook on the ACC is so bad. And SMU was a part of that. I thought they were going to be a 9-10 win team, and then they get pushed around by Brigham Young University. And BYU, I mean, we love BYU. We love Provo. They're kind of retooling things. It's not like a full rebuild, but they're retooling things. They lost some players last year, and this isn't the best version of BYU, but they still went into Dallas and pushed around SMU.
Give them credit, Brandon. I mean, this is back-to-back years. They've gone to the South and won. They beat Arkansas last year.
That's right.
On the road. And SMU might not be a bowl team. We don't know yet. They didn't look great. But give BYU credit. They go on the road and they win. And for them to do that and continue to build this program, they got to go to Wyoming next week. So they really built a funky little non-conference schedule for themselves to have 2 pretty challenging road games for where they're currently at as a team. They did a great job. And, with Jake Ratzliff at QB, he turned it over a couple times. He wasn't perfect, but he found a way to get done. I thought their defense was pretty physical throughout. Nice win for the Cougars. The Cougars to beat those ponies out of Dallas. A lot of money in that school, Brandon, last time I checked at SMU. But give credit where it's due for BYU. They needed that win. The conference needed that win. The conference, Brandon, ended up this weekend getting wins over the SEC, Big Ten, ACC, near all conferences.
That's
felt
right.
Like there were
picked up a couple of SEC wins.
Couple of SEC wins. Last year we discussed it, Brandon. We had horrible non-conference luck. They did not play well in the non-con, and yes, we took some losses too yesterday. Let's not overlook that. But they got some big wins too, and this was one of them. Even if it's 2 lesser schools in their own conference, it was still a needed one for the Big 12. Great win for BYU. Man,
I'm so glad that you bring that up because you're absolutely right. I mean, this time last year, we felt pretty down and out about the Big 12. I mean, we saw Texas Tech lose to Wyoming. I mean, we saw a couple of just real bad losses for the conference, and now, yeah, the tide has turned a little bit. The Big 12 is going out to get some of these wins, a couple against the SEC. I mean, they're really having a good show in this non-con slate.
It's important, Brandon, because if they don't look, there's a guaranteed Big 12 team going to make the college football playoff now. That's guaranteed. Like, that's the beauty of this 12-team playoff. You're guaranteed to have a representative. But, those wild card bids, we'd like to see another Big 12 team make it. Heck, I'd love to see two make it. And winning these games are very important to doing that. So, yeah, I mean, this was an important week 2 slate. And I say we passed yesterday. I mean it. I really believed the Big 12 got a passing report card. It wasn't straight A's, but it was a pass, and I'd say even above class average.
I think you're absolutely right there. And we talked about the SEC wins. They picked up one, probably the best. I mean, I would say Iowa State's close, but probably the most competitive, compelling game to watch. Oklahoma State and Arkansas. Boy, it looked like Arkansas was going to run them out of their own building. Taylon Green looked awesome. By the way, I love watching Taylon Green play. He plays exactly how I like to play in college football 25. It's kind of a problem sometimes. He gets a little reckless out there, but boy, he's fun to watch. But Oklahoma State, as Oklahoma State does, they settled in. They didn't go outside of what Cowboy football is. They hung in there, clawed their way back, and got a gritty home win against an SEC team. By the way, Arkansas is a lot better than people are going to give them credit for. That was a good win for Oklahoma State.
I agree. Arkansas looked like a top 25 team in the first half. They really played well. Their rushing attack was great yesterday. I mean, Jackson had almost 150 yards, Brandon. They held Ollie Gordon in check. Like, I'll give him a lot of credit. Ollie Gordon did not have a big day. Bowman did throw for over 300, but Arkansas took it to them in the first half. And if Oklahoma State didn't have a pick six for a touchdown, they were shut out the first half. The offense was absolutely terrible. They struggled still in that third quarter, but then they found some juice in the fourth quarter of a couple of touchdown drives. Arkansas hit a crazy field goal as time expired to go to OT, and Oklahoma State found a way to get it done. And boy, it felt like vibes of even worse maybe of that South Alabama game last year where they just didn't show up in non-con for Oklahoma State. Arkansas is much better than them. For them to find a way to get it done, especially after a really good week 1 win against South Dakota State, I still think that's a slept-on win, and that's why I felt pretty confident Oklahoma State was going to get it done yesterday. Arkansas fought their tail off. I don't think they'll be a bowl team. If they play like that, that's a bowl Arkansas team. No one's going to doubt that. Nice to see Bobby Petrino back in. I was looking for the motorcycle. Couldn't find it yesterday, Brandon. But, yeah, if Oklahoma State, they've got to just stay the course. You and I are both high on them, Brandon. They were a team for me. I think they can make the conference championship game. But we did see some other contenders step up as well yesterday.
And maybe not a contender here, but a classic Big East matchup, Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. And we talked a lot of praise for Cincinnati last week. They blew the doors off of Townsend. Sorsby almost had 400 yards passing. We talked about we just need to see something out of Cincinnati this year. And we saw that last week. And then it looked like they were going to see it again this week. They jumped up. I think they were up 17 in the third quarter, and then they just let it slip through their fingers. They lose to Pitt. Tough. It is a power forward team, and they did play well for the first 2.5 quarters, but tough loss for Cincinnati.
It was, and I felt like two programs that were in pretty similar boats in terms of they're trying to get their way back up towards the top. And you're right. Cincinnati looked like they were in great shape. I thought they were going to get it done. I mean, at one point, Brandon, I think this team was up, 17, maybe even more based on what I'm quickly going through the box. And for them to lose that lead at home, and Pittsburgh's not a bad loss. Let's be very clear, ladies and gentlemen. It's not. But it's a tough one for Cincinnati because you win that game, you're 2-0, you just beat a school you don't really like in Pittsburgh. And kudos to the old Big East reference, Brandon. That was absolutely necessary for this conversation. But I don't know. How do they respond is going to be my question for Cincinnati. Still a lot of season to go. They have a pretty tough Big 12 slate. They were not too kind to Cincinnati in certain games, but how do they respond? But this is a bitter loss because this was at home. Crowd was not too bad for them yesterday. I thought it was pretty loud in there. And for them to not get it done at home and let Pittsburgh kind of steal one in the fourth quarter, that's got to be painful.
Absolutely, and just coming off of a good win, it's tough to not see the same kind of performance week to week, because that would have really been a great start for Cincinnati. I mean, I don't think that either of us are surprised that they're sitting here 1-1, but just knowing how close they were to a good 2-0 win over Pittsburgh, a dominant win over Townsend, that would have been huge for him.
It would have been needed. I mean, it wouldn't have hurt. I mean, and they're trying to be bowl eligible. Every team's trying to be bowl eligible. You get this type of a win, Brandon, I'm thinking they can get 6-7 wins. They can find a way to bowl eligibility. You lose this, though, now it becomes much more difficult. You got to defend your home turf.
Next game on the slot, or on the docket, again, another very competitive game. Kansas State and Tulane. By the way, I don't know how Tulane talked Kansas State into coming to NOLA. I thought that was interesting. You typically don't see home and homes with group of 5 teams, but I mean, shout out to Kansas State. They didn't run from it. They went to NOLA. Kind of got punched in the mouth throughout the early part of the game. Fell behind 14-3, and trailed all the way up until the end of the third quarter. They tied things up and then exchanged a couple of touchdowns before finally getting an interception as Tulane's knocking on the door to tie things up late in the fourth quarter. Avery Johnson, I think, is going to be exactly where we go first. Not efficient passing, 181 yards, 2 touchdowns. I kind of gave him some flack last week, but he did hit some really good throws, especially down the field. It doesn't seem like they like him going down the field a lot, which seems like he's really good at it. And I haven't watched a whole lot of him, but I know he's a great athlete, and I've seen him throw a lot of good deep balls.
Yeah, and Johnson, I mean, he just don't turn the ball over. That's got to be his role. Make the plays within your system. Keep running with Giddens. He had over 100 yards rushing yesterday. And yeah, that defense got carved up, Brandon. I mean, they gave up over 300 passing yards. They gave up some running yards as well. But the big thing is they forced turnovers. And that was such an important deal. And that fumble recovery mid-fourth, I mean, Tulane's driving. They're in Kansas State territory. To force a fumble, for Romaine to recover it and race towards the other end for a touchdown, that was the difference. I mean, it was 27-27. K-State's a gritty team. That's a game they lose last year. They did not get those games done. They didn't get it done against Mizzou. That was a tough loss against a Mizzou team that turned out to be quite good.
Didn't feel like it at the time, though.
Didn't feel like it at the time, but that was quite a good Mizzou team. And Mizzou's not bad again this year. Iowa State at home, let's be honest, it's not like they didn't have their chances, but Iowa State found a way to get it done in a game that K-State could have easily won themselves. Those are games they lost last year. They won it this time. And, I mean, I know how you feel about Kansas State. You're very high on them when you mention, 12 fat wins potentially going into this season. It wasn't pretty at times. There's still some question marks. Let's not sugarcoat it. Did they get a win on the road against a pretty pesky Tulane team that did play in a Power 6 bowl just a couple of years ago? Yes, they did.
Let's see here. Up next, a Big 12 matchup that wasn't technically a Big 12 matchup in Baylor and Utah. And real quick before I dive into this game, I had an epiphany about Utah fans that kind of shed some light on why they are the way that they are. And first and foremost, I'll never accept any Big 12 slander. The way that I've seen some of them talk down in the Big 12, not a fan of that. Never will be a fan of that. Never will let that slide. But I did kind of relate to them because it feels like they're on the same track as a Denver Nuggets fan where you're banging the table for years. Like, hey, Nikola Jokic is awesome. Nobody else knows about Nikola Jokic except for us. And then he finally wins a couple of MVPs. And then that slander immediately goes to, well, he can't win the big one. He can't win a championship. It's like, well, yes, he can. He's such a championship player. He's such an elite player. He can lead his team to a championship. It's just the chips have fallen outside of his control. And then they finally win. And you were like, we've been telling you this entire time. We've been right about everything. And then I was like, oh, well, now these guys are just pompous and they're arrogant. And now they finally get some success and they start yapping. It's like, mother, we've been trying to tell you about this. And I think that's kind of where Utah is, where, I mean, coming from the Mountain West to the Pac-12, kind of taking on that underdog role for a long time. And I had some Utah fans reach out to me yesterday. Like, yeah, that's a pretty good analogy as far as we've always played this underdog card. We and we finally start to find some good success in the Pac-12, win back-to-back Pac-12 championship games, and then the big dogs just leave and the whole conference falls apart. I mean, that's not a great feeling. So I have some newfound empathy for Utah fans. Won't accept the Big 12 slander by any means, but I see the vision. I see where they're coming from.
Yeah, you know what, Brandon? I'm proud of you. That's growth right there.
We're
Brandon
growing.
Shanahan
That's right.
is willing to make changes and grow as a human being. I think that's very important here on the Go Big 12 or Go Home podcast, is that him and I are willing to change, even if him and I are still just going to rip people and slander people at nonstop if necessary. Well, I cannot wait for basketball season and to rip Iowa women's basketball, but that's for a future
Can't
time.
wait.
That's for a future time. Can't wait for that attendance number first game. Okay, now for Baylor, nothing wrong with that loss. I mean, that's a great Utah team. Non-conference game ultimately is what's going to count towards. Utah took care of their business. It's a good win. But it gives them a taste of Big 12 football, even if Baylor's probably going to be the lower end of the standings this season. But I think the game played exactly how you and I thought it would. I think that's really the perfect way to say it.
Yeah, I think kind of the big question mark for Utah is how serious that hand injury is with Cam Rising. Everything that I've seen says it's not very serious. And I mean, when you're up 20, I mean, what were they up 23-3 at halftime, and your star quarterback goes down? Probably like, let's just settle down here. And they did just that. They were in control of the second half. They didn't score any points, but that's fine. They didn't need to. Also had somebody chirp me about another game on Twitter last night about a team not scoring in the second half. I'm like, well, you don't need to when you're up 4 touchdowns. That's one of the perks of being up 4 touchdowns is you can take your foot off the gas. But that's what it looked like from Utah. I think this game would have been more lopsided if Cam Rising finished it out. Hope he's healthy. And yeah, I'm happy to come around on Utah, especially because it looks like that they are going to be as good as we may have hoped that they wouldn't be.
I couldn't have put it better myself, Brandon. And that hand injury is big. That's a significant deal. They got to keep relying on that defense. That defense is still really good, Brandon.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. Even if it is serious, that defense will keep them, I'd say, any Big 12 game, no question. Should they make a college football playoff, it'll keep them competitive, I think, against near any team they play outside of maybe a couple that are just on a different level right now.
My favorite game of the Big 12 slate this weekend, the Cy-Hawk Trophy. I mean, it'll never see that Iowa locker room again in Kinnick Field. I love it. Back-to-back Cy-Hawk Trophy wins for the Cyclones in Kinnick. And boy, it looked like, and I'm sure you'll piggyback on this quite a bit. It looked like every Cy-Hawk game I've ever seen, where Iowa State comes in. They're equally as talented. I think they're equally as well coached. They have the quarterback advantage. I thought going into it, they had the RB1 advantage. I'm not as sure about that today, but they could match up well, but they just can't figure it out. They just seem unprepared when they step onto the field with the Iowa, and that's what it looked like for a while. And then they finally they hung in there. That defense did such a great job bending and not breaking. That Iowa could have blown that game open quite early on, but Iowa State hung in there, and then they finally keep it close late, make a couple of big plays with that quarterback Rocco Beck. Jalen Knoll, absolutely lethal combination. And then, I mean, a freshman kicker, trust me, as a team who has 0 kickers, that is very impressive. And if I was a Cyclone fan, I wouldn't have been able to sleep last night. That was unbelievable.
You know, Brandon, I just had the biggest grin across my face. I even stopped smiling for hours. I think all week this week. Bro, 2 weeks because we get a bye this week. So
you just get
smile. No pain for 14 days. I'm just going to bask in the victory. And those players, they'll probably enjoy the week. They'll get ready for that next week. They have to move on. I don't have to. I'm going to just bask in this for the entire year. You know, they got to move on. I don't. I can just enjoy it. Look, you're dead right. It just felt like a vintage Iowa State game. It was not pretty. They were killing us on special teams the first half. The field advantage chunk and us playing within the 5 was driving me crazy. I'm like, it's just so painfully accurate. Our punter's hands were shaking. He struggled with every freaking snap, and it was driving me crazy. I'm like, please don't butcher, because we've gotten killed on special teams. It feels like every single game. But there's a tale of 2 halves, and Iowa sure had their chances to just take it to us and put us away first half. that defense did not quit. Give John Haycock, defensive coordinator, so much credit. They were killed by injuries, the linebacking position. Don't get me wrong, Caleb Johnson ripped us apart. Johnson played a great game. Give him a lot of credit for Iowa. I will. But they hung in there, and they stuffed him enough times, and then they decided to just keep passing a lot. And that was to Iowa State's advantage. Rocco Beck did not start the game strong. But he finished the game strong, Brandon, and he was brilliant. That last drive was genius. And even though Iowa State, I think, was a little too conservative for my taste at times in that fourth quarter, Brandon, and we could have a very different narrative if Beck doesn't pull off a wild little 35-second drive down the field. Jalen Noel, what a wide receiver. He's, top 3, top 5 in this conference. The way he played yesterday, he made Iowa's secondary look silly. That's a good Iowa secondary. So for Iowa State, this is a significant win. I know there was hype going into the season. I had expectations. I didn't know if we could come in here and win. I don't know. It didn't feel right, but they found a way. And I want to give CBS a lot of credit as well. That was the first time Iowa State's played on CBS since 1971. That's what they said in the broadcast yesterday for Iowa. 1985. CBS's presentation of college football. I'm so happy they're no longer exclusive to the SEC. In fact, they don't even do SEC anymore. What a beautiful presentation of football. They do such a great job. And people can rip Gary Danielson. I'm not saying he's perfect in the past, but I enjoyed his analysis. And Brad Nessler's a great game caller. So shout out to CBS. They really, I thought it was just the aerial shots of the stadium. I thought they did nail how loud it was in Kinnick. And it can get loud in there. I can't deny that. What a win for Iowa State. What a tough loss for Iowa. But we have, as an Iowa State fan, I know that pain because we've been on that side too. So kudos to both teams. That's why the game's played. It's a great rivalry. They might not be each other's main rival anymore, but doesn't mean they have to like each other. And it was a good game. It's good for the state.
I don't know. It feels pretty close to it, but I mean, outstanding win for Iowa State. And boy, it's just so nice to see the game set up in a way where it's like, I've seen this movie 100 times. And I know how it ends. And then it ends your way. And I got to imagine it's going to do a whole lot of confidence. Like, hey, even if it feels like this is the same old Cyclones team, we're still able to change the ending of the story. I thought it was beautiful. Beautiful game for the Clones.
Well, and we'll go to that last drive, Brandon. I mean, for them to quickly get out of bounds, little 10-yard pitch and catch, and then for Noel to beat his man on the line, just muscle through him, run down the sideline. Beck threw a perfect ball to him right on the money, and he got 30. Boy, they almost butchered it, though, because they had about 23 seconds left, and they threw a little in route to Bramer right on the line of scrimmage. He didn't get out of bounds, and that cost him 14 seconds, Brandon. I thought they need 10 more yards. We got to get within this kid's range. I didn't think nobody was going to get it through. I had my doubts. I'm not going to lie to you, Brandon. I thought, I know how this ends. And when he booted that thing, I'm like, is that staying straight? And when he put it, I'm like, that's got it. He's got it. It was bullseye money. That kid can do whatever he wants in Ames for the rest of his life, up to certain extents, of course.
Can't gamble. Can't gamble on Iowa State football.
Can't gamble.
Learn that.
Don't commit crimes.
Shout out Hunter Deckers. He's crushing it at Iowa Western, by the way. He's crushing. He's going to win a national championship for the Reavers.
There you go. I mean, Haywarden legend right there. No, but I mean, up to certain extents. But you know what? That man wants to be a little intoxicated publicly. I think the city of Ames is just going to let him just be who he needs to be. That was special win. A win that team will never forget. And for Coach Matt Campbell, boy, he was getting ripped on Twitter the first half.
Yeah, absolutely.
By Cyclone fans, ripped apart. And boy, was Kirk Ferentz getting ripped by Iowa fans the second half. So I just love this state that even though these two fan bases, hate each other, genetically we're all the same. Like, we are just not afraid to rip people. It is a great rivalry. I'll tell you what, Brandon, it is a great rivalry, and it's why yesterday, it's why TV companies pay a lot of money to get these games. It is quite good drama when you get these type of numbers.
Oh boy, another blood rivalry, Albany and West Virginia. West Virginia cruises. We were both very highly confident on them. Garrett Green was efficient again. Good bounce back for the Mountaineers. Not a whole lot of extra analysis. They were good. That's what they needed.
Yep, no question about it, Brandon. And same with TCU. Took care of their business as well yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, the Big 12 owns the state of New York. I'll tell you what. They took care of business. While we're just skimming through
Print
some
that
of
on a
these
T-shirt.
games,
Print that on a T-shirt, Brandon.
Big 12 owns the state of New York. You're absolutely
We
right.
own New York.
UCF rolled Sam Houston pretty easily, 45-14. Shout out Arthur Gustavo Malzahn the third. KJ Jefferson was very efficient. Didn't have any touchdowns. 12 of 15 for 169. Um, Surprisingly efficient. I wouldn't have pegged that stat line for him.
Can we, you know what, Brandon? You sent me a wonderful screenshot tweet this morning of our beloved Gustavo. What was Auburn thinking? They not happy with 9-win, 10-win years when, their other, I know their hated rival is winning national championships, but it's not like they were bad. And now Auburn's just terrible. And I think Gustavo got the better end of that deal.
Yeah, I mean, well, because here's the problem, and I don't know if second tier SEC programs like Auburn understand this. Unless you have Nick Saban, unless you have Kirby Smart, unless you have Urban Meyer, those go out the door. Because how you build a national championship program is you raise the floor to 9-10 wins, meaning even when we're retooling, even when we lose our quarterback, we got to replace them, or we don't feel great at that position, we're still going to grind out nine wins a year. And then the stars align, like that 2019 LSU team, and all of your players are humming at the same time. Then that's when you win a national championship. That's typically how it's done. And Malzahn was the perfect coach for that. And the success was there. You had to retool a couple of things after that national championship run. But yeah, that's how a national championship program looks. It's not, again, unless you have Kirby Smart, unless you have Nick Saban, it doesn't look perfect all the time. And they got a little ahead of their skis, and they're still paying for it. They got beat up by Cal Berkeley last night at home. Love that. Just means more down south. Shout out Peyton Thorne. My favorite non-Nebraska related meme was Peyton Thorne after throwing 3 interceptions and trying to lead a game-winning drive, and it's Vince Carter. I got another one in me. Unbelievable performance out of him. Shout out to the powerhouse football program of Cal Berkeley, Golden Bears ACC powerhouse. But you're absolutely right. I mean, just a very silly thing. It's very funny to see them finally start to come around to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just straight comedy, Brandon. I mean, Auburn played some of the wildest football games I've ever seen in my life when he was coach. And they beat Alabama actually on a semi-regular basis, considering Bama's power status. They got him a few times under Malzahn. So you reap what you sow, I guess. And this podcast is full believers in Gus Malzahn. Brandon and I are one day going to be front row in Orlando with Gustavo right on our chest.
We'll be there.
We believe in you, Arthur. We believe in you.
We love it. Another kind of vindicating win for the Shanahan agenda. Kansas can't get it done in Champaign, Illinois. And I kind of like Illinois. I like Luke Altmaier. I think he's a fine Big Ten quarterback. But I saw, especially later on in the preseason, saw a lot of hype for Kansas. I didn't see it. Jalen Daniels, 18 for 32, 141 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. That's awful. That's so bad. And that's the catalyst of this team. I mean, the team runs with him.
Yeah.
The fact that he was that bad and was still within a 1-score game is pretty unbelievable to me. I'm surprised. Kansas did not look good at all. They might be worse than we think.
And his pick 6 was painful, Brandon. That was the difference in the game. Because Illinois' offense wasn't great. Kansas' defense played a winning game last night. But you can't turn the ball over. And Kansas, I think, going into the season, expectations, right, Brandon? For the once in our life, yep. Kansas not this bottom feeder anymore. People are expecting them to win. Their fan base is expecting them to win. Lance Leipold
ranked in the top 20.
Lance Leipold turned down reportedly. He could have had, I think, job hopped last year. No one's going to deny that. He's done a great job in Lawrence. This is a painful one. I think the second most disappointing performance in the conference this weekend, outside of the abysmal Tech effort. For them, though, they've got to find a way to adjust. And we'll see what Daniels can do, because last year, Daniels, he goes kind of out midway through the season. You and I had heavy concerns, Brandon. I remember that. What was it? Bean? I think it was Bean that comes in as their backup. Jason Bean, and he played great. I mean, they got some significant win. To go to Ames and beat Iowa State last year was a big win for Kansas. I thought Iowa State had that one in the bag, and Kansas found a way to get it done. So tough loss for Kansas. You can't turn the ball over if you're QB. Some QBs you kind of let just roll. And their QBs in this conference, Brandon, you kind of just let fire. But then there are other ones that, Daniels has that capability, but he's turning it over too much. They're going to have to find a way to let him play his style. They can't let him turn it over. It cost him the game last night. There's no question about it.
Yeah, the game that I've been looking forward to talking about the most. Colorado goes on the road to Nebraska. Obviously, I'm a huge Nebraska fan. We have our Cornhusker Connection show, so we'll talk more about it from the Nebraska point of view. But sticking with the Big 12 brand, again, very affirming night. Colorado was exactly who I thought they would be, and that's a slightly better version of the same exact team that they had last year. I mean, their offensive line's better. They only gave up 6 sacks as opposed to the 8 that they gave up last year, so that's progress. But they're going to be in some trouble. I love the fact that people are starting to catch up. It took them till the Oregon game last year to catch up and to get exposed. I'm glad that we're already getting this settled the first week of September. Baylor's gonna give them a fight, and that's the problem with Colorado, is that they do have the star talent. I mean, their wide receiving core is absolutely better than I could have expected. Travis Hunter is a superstar. Shedeur Sanders is a really good quarterback, and they are slightly better in the trenches. Shiloh Sanders goes down with a broken arm last night, so he won't be around. But you're gonna get every team's best shot. And I think we saw that last night. I mean, that Nebraska environment, and it's a rivalry. They're not going to get that in Waco, but no team's going to want to be the team that loses to Colorado. And I think Baylor is going to be a real good, measuring stick for what we're going to see Colorado moving forward.
Well, Brandon, I'll give your Huskers a lot of credit. That first half was incredible. They played a near perfect 30 minutes. I mean, they did not make many mistakes. When you have a 4-touchdown lead going into halftime, you did something right. And they clearly did. I was praising CBS's coverage earlier of how good their presentation of college football is. NBC's is also quite good. And they captured your environment so well last night. It was loud in Memorial Stadium. And Colorado's not going to see an environment like that the rest of the season. I mean that. I just don't think they'll see a Big 12 stadium like Memorial. So that's good. I mean, they kind of got a taste of like, hey, if you want to compete at a high level, you're going to have to be a little bit better going forward. This isn't it's a loss that's fine. No shame in losing that Nebraska team. That's a much better Nebraska team. But I think the way that they just didn't compete the first half, they didn't even look like they had practiced all week. I think they just thought they could show up and compete based on talent. And talent's not the problem, as you perfectly said, Brandon. But you got to be ready to go. And look, they're going to talk their talk. I said this last week. You're right. They're going to get every team's best shot. They're going to have a target on your back. I'm a former athlete. Brandon's a former athlete. If you're humble and you don't really say much, we still want to beat you, but it's like it's not as personal. When you yap a little bit in the press, or if you hear something or they say something to you, you get ticked. And you will take it to another level. And for every one of these college football teams, they don't like what, some of them don't like what Colorado's pulled. Some of these coaching staffs and other sides don't like what Colorado does. So they're going to give it, like Dan Lanning last year. Boy, it was a personal game for Oregon last year. I mean, that was personal when they beat them last year. So look, for Colorado, you're going to get team's best shots. There's still a bowl team. They have too much talent. If they don't get a bowl game, Brandon, I'll say I'm a bit surprised. I'll say it, because they've got talent, but they got to put it together. And we'll see if they can. And can the coaching staff make the changes? And can they maybe humble themselves just a little bit? They got an interesting one, though, next week. Colorado State in Fort Collins next week, Brandon.
It's going to get their best shot.
That was one of the best games in college football last year. That was a wild late night game that was heavily watched for some reason around the country. That was like 13 million decided to watch Pac-12 after dark last year, and that was a great game.
It was midnight and week 3. I mean, there were no other games.
Yeah,
and it was perfect. It was
people
unbelievable.
were watching though. They went to, I think, OT, if I remember right. They won.
That's right.
And Boulder was a great environment, but Colorado State runs a very good program, and they're off to a nice start. So that'll be a good game, and I wouldn't be shocked if Colorado State finds a way.
Yeah. Let's see here. Up next, looking down the slate before I say this, but yes, absolutely the most surprising game, I thought. So Houston at Oklahoma. I mean, we both, when we reveal our confidence, we were both our highest on Oklahoma. I mean, I love that Houston, hung around, but like you said earlier, much more about Oklahoma than this was about Houston. I was obviously occupied during that time, so I didn't get to watch it play by play, but I brought up the Apple Sports app. Also, sidebar, I've made the switch to Apple Sports for my marquee score app. Not an advertisement, but I've been loyal to the Score for years. Was an ESPN guy for forever. Apple Sports is clean. We might want to give that a. Yeah, it's
That's
clean.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's very nice. No ads on it. It's real clean experience. But so I was up, I was staying up to date there, and Oklahoma's going to pull away, right? Oklahoma's going to pull away. I was kind of expecting what happened in Tuscaloosa with South Alabama. Like, they pulled away at the end after really going toe to toe with the mighty Bulls of South Florida for 4 quarters. I thought that was going to happen. It never did.
Never did, Brandon. And give Houston a lot of credit. We've talked about Coach Fritz a lot. They did a great job. I mean, that went. I know they lost. That went about as well as you could ask. I mean it. They had a chance, 2 minutes to go with the ball to go get the win. They were down 2. For some reason, they decided to run on the goal line when they needed to probably pass a little bit more on first down. They got caught with a safety. And that was kind of low-key it, even though Oklahoma had a bizarre ending. Like, they were going to run out the clock, Brandon, and an offensive lineman decided to take his helmet off because he was ticked off at a player on Houston. They called a personal foul penalty, and they had to punt it back to Houston with 30 seconds left when the game was over.
Yeah.
It was a disaster for Oklahoma. I can't even – that OU team I thought had serious potential. They really liked Cole Arnold. I was hearing how good this kid was in preseason for the QB. That kid's not ready for the SEC, Brandon. I hate to say it. I don't like putting it that bluntly, but I don't see it right now. And he can change. He can prove me wrong. I always hope people prove me wrong, but that OU team did not look good. And compared to Texas, who that team looks like a potential serious contender for a national championship. I mean, they've taken care of their business through 2 weeks. No one's going to deny that. But on the other end, OU, boy, I'm not sure. That's going to be kind of remains to be seen. They looked undisciplined. Give Houston credit, though. I felt incredible picking Oklahoma. I thought that was just kind of a guaranteed win. So for them to struggle the way that they did, and then to Houston's credit, they hung in there. I thought they played a relatively clean game. They fought for 60 minutes. And yes, Coach Fritz wants wins. He doesn't want sentiment. He doesn't want a, hey, pat on the back. Good job, guys. But that coaching staff has to feel okay that, all right, we can compete on the road. And maybe as the season goes on, that can translate to wins in the Big 12. They have to be happy, considering how bad they looked week 1.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that moves the needle a ton for them. I mean, just to have something tangible to show these guys, like, hey, we're not as far off as we looked last week. I know we had a tough loss against UNLV. UNLV cruised again. They might actually be, towards that top of the Mountain West. But, I mean, just to have something like, hey, we're doing the right things. Just stick with the process. Things are going to get better from here. So shout out Houston. I talk about trying to claim Texas as the Big 12 team. I do not want to claim Oklahoma as a Big 12 team. They are fully SEC now. So not even the same credit as Texas goes. Speaking of Texas schools, and probably the most disappointing team of the week, Texas Tech. And it's so bad to see because in the circle that I work with here, Joey McGuire, very decorated Texas high school football coach. People talk about him. I mean, like the child that makes it out of the small town and goes to the big city and finds success. Everybody's rooting for him, even
Yeah.
even non-Texas Tech fans, and it's not working. It's not working. It's I don't know what it is. I don't know what's going on, but it's not working. It's not going well.
Worst performance of the weekend by far. Not even close. Shout out to Washington State. They've been put on a desert, Brandon. Abandoned by their conference. That team could have quit. They lose, coaches. They lose players. They lose a good QB. In Cam Ward, if I remember right, he was their QB there last year. And he's in Miami now. He's playing very well down there. He was at Washington State last year. He probably would have stayed with Washington State if they're still in the Pac-12. I think they could have found the money for him. They didn't have it. And for them to just take it to him last night was a mix of two things. I'll give Washington State a ton of credit. They don't look bad. They could have a good season. And we'll see how they do going forward. But Texas Tech, boy, I feel like fool's gold 2 years in a row, Brandon. I was high on them. I thought, hey, last year it's a learning moment. They'll address it. I'm not so sure right now. They could have easily lost week one to have not a good program at all, or not a program at their caliber. I don't know, Brandon. They might be the team that concerns me the most, just considering the expectations coming into the season. There's still a lot of season to go. There is still 10 regular season games for them. Plenty of time to make adjustments, but man, you have all off season. You have the preseason practices. They look like they're still like in June. Like their execution wasn't there. The schemes weren't there. They got to clean some things up. And again, prove me wrong, guys. Go prove me wrong. But they didn't look ready for the first 2 weeks. They could easily be 0-2.
They really could be, which is a huge problem. I'm not seeing the vision. Yeah, and you're right. Tangibly, everything they want to accomplish is still ahead of them. But boy, I'm just not seeing anything. And it's interesting to see that this box score. Washington State had a 197-yard rusher, and then Texas Tech is a team that throws it 58 times. So that was an interesting dynamic. Typically, you see that flippy-floppy, but shout out Washington State. Definitely, one of the top two teams in the Pac-12 this year. Don't have anything negative to say about them. Some more negative things to say. Arizona, I thought, had a bit of a letdown, 22-10 win over Northern Arizona. Noah Fafita was fine, 173 yards, a touchdown and interception. McMillan couldn't get things going in the same way that we saw last week. So just tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 catches for 11 yards.
We won't dive heavily into it due to time constrictions, but disappointed for Arizona for sure. They won, and I think this is one of those weeks. If you're a coach, you go into the film room and you say, hey, we've got some things to clean up. We're 2-0. They're in fine shape, and coaching staffs don't mind these games with the win, because then they're like, hey, we won. They also get to criticize during team session, and they get to address in practice. Hopefully you put together a better week next week. So take it as a positive, Arizona. You won. You're fine. Go address those mistakes and play a cleaner week 3.
Sorry, I had to look up a pronunciation real quick. But and then wrapping off the Big 12 slate, Arizona State picking up a touchdown win against SEC Mississippi State. Sam Levitt didn't look great. I was real high on him, especially after last week. But Cameron Scatabo, 33 carries. Unbelievable workload, but 262 yards. Unbelievable that he couldn't get in the end zone. That is heartbreaking for him, but it looks like he got all the work done.
And he led him in receiving as well, too, Brandon.
That's
3
right.
catches for 35 yards. So, Levitt took his touchdowns. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. That one didn't go to Scatabo, right. But great win for them. They were able to get to the quarterback too, Brandon. I think they had 4 or 5 sacks in the game. So I thought their defense played pretty stingy. Mississippi State's had some good teams last few years. Like, they're usually a productive SEC program. They've had some coaching changes, of course, with the passing of one of the great coaches in college football history, and Mike Leach. They've been trying to make some adjustments too. But for Arizona State and for the Big 12, great win. SEC, they took it. They did their job against the SEC for the most part yesterday. And even in their loss, they competed. So Big 12 had a good week. And for Arizona State, this is a program we weren't sure where they were at going into the season, Brandon, but I'm pleased with their efforts so far. I think they've done a really nice job, and they protected their home turf. It's a sleeping giant. Those two Arizona schools are sleeping giants. They can put it together. There's money in Arizona and Arizona State. There is interest. Who doesn't want to play in warm weather once it hits fall and winter? I know summer, those practices have got to be awful. But in the fall and winter, it's pretty nice down there, even in spring. So just credit where it's due. They got the job done.
I'll do it for us here today. Another great Big 12 slate. I think we'll learn a lot more about these teams. I think we'll learn more about Colorado. I think we'll learn a lot more about Arizona and Kansas State. I think we'll learn a lot more about UCF and TCU as we get into the thick of September. But any final thoughts before you sign off for another great week of Big 12 football?
It's a Cyclone State, ladies and gentlemen.
Cyclone State, Iowa, Ensign State now. Go Clones.
Go Clones.